Alright, how's it going? Steve again, Interglobal Comics. So I'm just going to go through a few sales here, not as many as last time. Try to stay on top of it a little bit better. But we'll get going here with some Russian comics. These are from like the AF-15 and the 181 are from like the first wave of Russian comics. And then the Tales of Suspense was in the second wave. And these aren't in terrible prices, basically, because these you were able to pick up for $20 not too long ago, but with the war going on in Russia, it's gotten really difficult to get packages from Russia. I actually, for the first time in probably a year, got a package from Russia, but it took, I think, about 4 months to get here. And that was after it got rejected twice at customs. So really, getting new Russian comics is pretty difficult. So you're gonna have to pay up if you haven't gotten them yet. You didn't get them while you're cheap. They were cheap. They are gonna be a little bit more expensive now, and especially probably the newest ones. The newest wave that they did was Tomb of Dracula 10, Werewolf by Night 32, and ASM 101, the first Morbius. Those were released right before the war started, and very few probably made it to America in comparison to how many made it from the previous waves. So just something to look out for. This was a huge sale for the Ultimate Fallout 4 variant cover from Russia. This was a free comic day book. I don't believe it contains the entire comic. I haven't looked at mine in a little bit, but for that price, it's a pretty strong price, because this book was just released, I think, just about a year, maybe two ago. So it's not old. It wasn't printed, when Ultimate Fallout 4 was originally printed. So for my money, I would rather have the Italian or the French that use the variant cover. But there's something just really cool about these Russian comics, and you can't deny that. So this one I believe it sold for around $600. New Mutants 82, first appearance of Cable, sold for $40, plus $20 shipping from Spain. So you're about $60 there, but it looks like a pretty nice copy. This was a real strong sale. Like, never seen anyone pay this much for this book before. Spider-Man 300 from Brazil. Obviously doesn't use the same cover, but $214. That's I've seen these for as cheap as $30, and I think I actually have one on the market report that went super cheap on American eBay, which is surprising. But it's a cool book in its own right. It's digest size. You can see how small it is. It's a cool cover, and it's a good looking book, and it has the guts that you want with a cool cover to boot. So you can't complain about that. This was insanely cheap. Darth Vader 1, 2, and 3. So they put Spanish, and then they put Mexico, and this is actually the Mexican version. And the Darth Vader 3 from Mexico is actually the hardest one to find. So somebody got a steal on this, because that Darth Vader 3, I've seen sell for over $100 on its own. It is from my experience, I do have this set complete as far as I know, and that is the hardest one to find. I've never seen one sell that cheap. I got lucky recently and was able to find a Peruvian copy. I saw somebody else post it that they were selling it, and I was like, oh, let me see if I can find one for cheap. And luckily, within a couple of days, I was able to find one. I actually got that for free from the publisher. So as far as I know, I believe there's the German, Italian, Mexican, Spanish, Peruvian, and then the American. I think I got them all. I would have to double check them. This was the Mexican foil Hulk 181. This is a 9.8, so 129 actually, seemed kind of cheap. These are really cool looking books. They're not old. They were printed in the 2000s, but great looking cover with the foil treatment, and a 9.8, so not a bad deal. So this is the Lamole Venom 3 third print, first appearance in Knull. This book has really dropped like a rock, down to $81. I think at one point it was selling for, $300 around there, or it's kind of bounced all over the place like all these foreigns, but I've never seen one this cheap. Another one that's really seems to be suffering, the Edge of Spider-Verse 2, the land variant. This one sold for $37 with 16 bids. I think that's about the cheapest I've ever seen one go for as well. This was selling, I think, $200 to $300, in the kind of the peak of the market last year. All right, so this was, I'll just kind of zoom in here. These were all the non-canon Spider-Mans from Mexico. They were listed. So none of these were released in America. These were all Mexican done art by Jose Luis Duran, the covers, and they had original stories inside. So some of these, like this one, I don't see too often with Kingpin cover. This one, for some reason, I do see quite a bit. I've got one of those. Picked that one up from Matt Roybal a long time ago. And then these other ones, these aren't like the real desirable ones, and obviously the desirable ones are going to be the ones with Gwen Stacy on them, or any other hot girl wearing hardly any clothes, because that's kind of what they were famous for. But still cool books, and for $300, it's not bad, because these, a few years ago they were selling for more. So these have definitely dipped a little bit, not too much, but definitely the interest has kind of waned on them some. And here's another one sold for $300. This one does have a girl on the cover, but Spider-Man's like basically nowhere to be found except up there flying like Superman for some reason. I've got the Spanish, $298 and $299. Went pretty cheap. They look pretty good condition. These are kind of like almost not quite magazine, but they're definitely bigger than the normal American comic size. But good looking books, and those went pretty inexpensive. And the interesting thing about this top one, the $299, is this actually has Venom's first appearance in it. The way they space the books out, this actually contains $299 and the first half of $300. So if you're one of those people that's all about accurate guts, then this is the book you really want, as opposed to the one with the $300 cover. Me, I'm more of a cover hunter, so I have all of them. I've got $298, $299, and the $300 and the $301. But if I was just to have one, I would take $300. Giant size X-Men 1 from Spain, sold for $114, with $25 shipping from Spain. This is a cool book. It's like the multicolor Batman. This is from Mexico, NOVARO, old book, 1958. Sold for $100, which kind of surprised me. I thought that would sell for a bit more, but maybe the condition, and the front cover doesn't look terrible, but maybe the back cover is real rough. I'm not sure, but yeah, I'm surprised that one didn't sell for more. And this was the Mexican Green Lantern, Batman. The numbering in Mexico is a 601. But this one is actually the Mexican. There's a Spanish and a Mexican version, and this is the Mexican version, which is considered to be much more rare. And this one's sold for $107. And there's another Superman 233, classic Neil Adams Superman cover, sold for $50. Seems like a pretty good deal. I think at one point I had one of these, and I think I sold it for about $90. So foreign prices, it's just kind of, it's what's available when you have the money. So sometimes you find it for $100, sometimes you find it for $50, sometimes you find it for $2. You just never know. This one's been sitting kind of on eBay, kept going to auction, and someone finally bought it. I thought about it for a little bit, but you can see up here someone had gotten to the cover with a marker and like scribbled out something up here. So that just kind of held me back from buying it. But first appearance of Silver Age Catwoman, Lois Lane 70. Kind kind of just a fun book. Lois Lane fighting Catwoman on the cover. And there's this one, and I know there's an Italian version as well, but I'm not sure which other countries printed this book. And this one is the first Silver Age appearance of the Penguin. This one went for very cheap, $59, but if you look closely, it does look like it was removed from a bind. So I'm not even sure if the cover was attached or not. And this is actually, this is the Spanish edition, not the Mexican. So it's actually a Spanish price variant. So sold for $59. So, not a bad deal. At one point I had my copy for sale because I needed to buy something else. And I think I was asking like $125. I had a few interested people, but I ended up just hanging on to it because, it's in pretty nice condition, and I ended up selling something else to not have to sell this one. These were some questionable sales. Quite a few people were talking about these in kind of like in the private chats. This was sold by somebody that's always kind of come across a little sketchy. Doesn't deal in foreign comics normally, and he's had these for sale forever. He was a guy that was kicked out of the CGC boards a while ago, but he has a lot of great comics, and these are two big foreign keys, but they've been listed forever, and for them to have sold at the same time for incredibly high prices just seems a little suspect. But who knows? If these were legit sales, then congrats to him. They're those would definitely be some record sales. I'd have to double check what the best the offers were, but it was, since I didn't really think these were legit sales, I didn't even honestly bother. We've got the Mexican second time the Mexican 129 was printed in Mexico. The red cover, it was in 1982, sold for $250. That's about the highest I've ever seen that sell for. It doesn't look to be in that great a condition, so $250 seemed a little high, but all these Mexican Novedades books seem to be doing pretty well these days, and just the color variations on them, they're just good looking books. They're attractive books. This is a Pinocchio NOVARO from 1950. Sold for $100. Just kind of a curiosity, I kind of keep an eye on like the old Disney comics sometimes just to see if they sell, because when I'm searching, I see tons of these old Disney comics for sale for really cheap in Spain and Mexico and other places, but it's just I'm not sure if the interest is there on the American market, so I really don't bother to buy too many of them myself, but apparently someone wanted this one because they bought it for $100. This was the Dr. Doom Kaliman cover. This was originally printed, I believe, in Colombia in the 70s, and then in Mexico they redid it in the 2000s. So they've got the Dr. Doom cover, they have the Galactus cover. There's a few other good ones where they just basically swiped or stole these Marvel characters to be the Kaliman's bad guy. And interestingly, it's just on the cover, or at least on the Galactus one, he's just on the cover. He's nowhere else. I recently sold my copy of the Galactus one to a collector in Australia. He's a big Galactus fan, so I figured I just needed some money to finish up a CGC order, so you gotta let some stuff go. So he hopefully has it now, or at least it's hopefully still on its way from the US to Australia now. $40 for a Secret War 8 Italian version. Looks pretty nice condition. This was an interesting sale because this was they called it restored, and it says it's restored because of color touch, but this was pulled from a bind, so I wasn't really sure how CGC would address this because there's obviously going to be glue and the whole spine's missing. So I'm surprised someone actually even submitted this to get graded, and it probably wasn't that great of an investment because they only sold it for $100. Yeah, so submitting this book probably cost them $30 to $50. I'm sure they probably paid close to $50 for even this coming out of a bind. So they might have broken even, probably lost money. So I don't really recommend anyone buy these pulled from bind books unless it's like something incredibly rare. Because I just kind of feel like if you just hold out long enough and are patient, you'll be able to find a complete copy. So the Greek seller that's selling all these sets is still going. They sold these for first appearance of Lizards for $129. He's got two of the Greeks and a German and an Italian. French Canadian first appearance of Killmonger, Jungle Action, sold pretty cheap there for $23. For some reason, there's just people keep listing these French Canadian heritage books for cheap. This is a French from France, Tomb of Dracula 10. This one sold for $149. I can't tell if this is the thicker or the thinner one. It looks like the thinner one to me, but it's hard to tell just from the cover. But there's two different versions, so they both came out pretty close together. One is basically just like a collected edition, but it does have the Tomb of Dracula 10 cover on it. But one is a little bit thinner, like probably this one says 164 pages, and then there's one that's like 300 and something pages or 400 pages almost, so it's super thick. First Storm Shadow Snake Eyes French Canadian edition. This is the famous silent issue, sold for $40. And that one appears to have been pulled from a bind, so something you got to look out for. A lot of the French Canadian comics were put into binds, and a lot of them get pulled out and sold, so you got to just check the spines to see if yours was pulled or not. It's a pretty nice looking Spider-Man 129, sold for $1,200 Canadian. I'm not exactly sure what the exchange rate is, but it's I'd have to look it up, but it's definitely probably closer to like $600-700 US dollars, so not a bad deal. If it does look to be in pretty nice condition. The Dutch Daredevil 7 Namor cover sold for $135. A lot of 26 random Greek Spider-Mans for $165, and that sounds like a great deal, but you got to be careful because this seller is the same seller that sells all the Greek Spider-Man keys. So obviously he's sold all the keys, and this is his way of clearing out back issues, which if you're gonna like take the time to price all these out and sell them individually, you'll make some money, but he didn't show any of the pictures of any of the issues, so it's kind of just like a guessing game what you got in there. So I wouldn't expect any big keys in there, but still not a bad price for a whole bunch of foreign comics. This was a private listing that I just kind of stumbled upon. So someone spent right around $900 on a 3 very high grade Star Wars weeklies from the UK. They were, I think, 9.6, 9.4, and another upper 9.0 or right there in the 9 range somewhere. Just kind of random issues. So I thought that was interesting because they're not really key issues, but someone paid up to get the high grade copies. Creepy Worlds, second appearance of Dr. Doom. Kind of a lower grade copy it looks like, but sold really cheap for $42. Alright, so this is a Pence Amazing Fantasy 15, sold for $18,200. So I had kind of a discussion going with another guy that sells foreigns and collects foreigns, and he was saying that, you know, these Pence copies and Canadian price variants are foreign editions, whereas the majority of collectors I know, they don't consider these foreign comics, because the main number one reason is that these were printed in America. They changed the press to put the the Pence price on them, or the Canadian dollar price. So typically, I think for foreign comic collectors, I want the comic to have been printed in that foreign country by a foreign publisher. So there was no Amazing Fantasy 15 printed in the UK that used the cover. That eventually was printed in a comic called Out of This World, but it was just an interior appearance. So to me, that is Amazing Fantasy 15 UK edition. This would be it's a price variant, but the price variants are much more rare than the American versions. So it's still great books, great things to collect. I have only a couple of the price variants. I don't really chase them. I'm more into the foreign editions. But that's my opinion. I think his opinion was that new collectors are starting to consider the Pence and the Canadian price variants to be actual foreign editions, and it doesn't matter if they're printed on the U.S. Printer or not, and that's fine. Like I said to him, I was like, there is no right or wrong answer here. It's just a matter of opinion. So there's plenty of rooms for different opinions, and it's all for fun. Nothing to get worked up over. So here's a UK edition, actual foreign edition. This is a Mighty World. What is it? The Mighty World of Marvel 198, the Hulk 181 UK edition. This one was triple signed, and it was a 5.5. Sold for $3,000. So that's a very hefty price, but a book you would never be able to replicate today. So somebody that's a big Wolverine fan went all in and got that signed copy. So it's a very cool book, and one of my favorite of the Hulk 181 foreign editions. This is a Tomb of Dracula 1. I had my eye on this. This is Australian, a Yaffa. Sold for $151 plus $30 shipping. Great looking comic. I like the changes in the colors that they made, and just a cool looking book. The variations are interesting on it. So $151. That's not a bad deal, I don't think. So the Newtons I don't know if I went over the Newtons last time I made a market report, but they have definitely dipped in price, the Australian Newtons. So this was a pretty nice looking copy, no poster, sold for $200, and the no poster copies were selling for closer to $300 to $400 not that long ago. So these have definitely come down in price, which is probably good for everybody. Invincible Iron Man 1 with the poster sold for $228. I think the last one I saw sold for $300 or $400 with the poster. And then this one was super cheap, Conan 1. This one doesn't contain a poster. It just says a free poster offer on the cover. This one went for $31, which was incredibly cheap. I would think this would sell for at least $100. But somebody got a great deal. It does look low grade, but not a bad deal at all. Talked about that one. All right, and here we have the first appearance of Scarecrow from Italy. Beautiful comic, great looking cover. Sold for $229. Looks pretty high grade too, and $35 shipping. I made the mistake of selling my version of this book a while ago and never replaced it, and probably now it's too late. But oh well. If I really want it, I'll have to pay up for it now. And here's another. So this makes even less sense than the last Italian Marvel Spotlight 5 that we saw, because this one is also pulled from a bind. You can see Daredevil, half of Daredevil's face up there is missing, and this one sold raw for $200. So somebody paid $100 for the CGC slabbed one, and then somebody else paid twice that amount for a raw version of the same comic that is still damaged. But like I said, don't don't go crazy with these pulled from bind Italian and German. The German and French Canadian books, they all pulled them from binds. And if you're getting a book pulled from a bind, you definitely want to pay, like, I'd say a quarter of the price. So $1.99, is would have been a great deal if this was like a complete copy. But yeah, from pulled from a bind, I guess someone just really wanted it and didn't mind paying up for it. This is a Fantastic Four #1 from Italy. They used this kind of goofy cover. The rumor I heard was that the actual cover that we got in America was supposed to be shipped over to them so they could use it, and got lost along the way or something, and they ended up going kind of with this cheesy, family portrait looking picture. But the interior, it does contain Fantastic Four #1, and this was printed in 1970. So it definitely has value. I wouldn't say it's not worth anything. It's a cool book, and it's just kind of, to me, it looks a little goofy. So I saw this one just today, and it's the Amazing Fantasy 15 from Italy. This was actually, if this is the original, this is a great price, $2.49, because this is probably the highest grade copy I've ever seen for sale. The back cover was flawless. The front cover looks almost flawless. But the only problem is that they are now reprinting these in Italy. Somebody's bootlegging them and selling them, and I'm not convinced this isn't a bootleg. Some of the colors look a little bit off, and it's almost just like too fresh and clean looking. But in the description they say it's from 1970 and that this is the original. So I didn't see anywhere in the listing that said this was a bootleg. So hopefully this is a legit copy and somebody got the steal of the century, because that one's gonna grade out pretty well. And this is the only foreign comic that uses the actual original AF-15 cover. So great looking book, and you wouldn't even be able to find this on Italian eBay for this price. So that's what makes it kind of suspect to me of why someone would be selling it for cheaper than you can buy them in Italy on American eBay. So that's what makes me a little concerned that this is a bootleg and not an actual copy. So if you're the one that bought this and you're watching this, check that book out real thoroughly when it arrives. Star Wars 1, this is from 1978 Germany, and this actually looks like it's the album. Yeah, it is the album. So this isn't even the cover. This is the inside, the first page. It has a different cover, but it does contain Star Wars 1, 2, and 3, I think, and it's sold for $187. So that's a very strong price for that book. The album normally sells cheaper than just the single Star Wars 1 from what I've seen, but it's probably more rare. So it's a cool book and not something you see all the time, and these are huge. I had no idea when I bought mine that they are bigger than magazine size. I don't think you could slab it if you wanted to. These Star Wars German comics are very large for some reason. All right, and so I talked about that that Italian AF-15 that looked a little suspect to me, and here's something even more suspect. So this now is, they're reprinting some of these hit comics from Germany. These were from 1968. They're reprinting them in Germany. It's just a bootleg. It's not being produced by a publisher. But somebody bought one, sent it to PGX, and PGX put on there that this is an original. And they say it was published in 1968 or 9, which is completely inaccurate. This isn't the same comic. This was probably printed this year. So PGX made a complete mistake, and somebody basically got conned out of $220. This is a modern book that just came out this year. It's a bootleg. It's not the original, and I'm assuming this will probably get returned to the buyer it'll get returned to the seller once the buyer figures this out. because I don't think even if it's a cool looking book, and I would buy one for sure if it was under $20, but it is a bootleg. It's not an original copy, and so I wouldn't, and I'm not exactly sure what the description says on this listing, so I can't put all the blame on the seller, and majority of the blame should be on PGX because this is their job to verify comics. But the seller hopefully did note that this is not from the 1960s, that this is a modern reprint. Here we've got the French Hulk 180 and 181. Sold for $123, kind of an ugly cover, and this was the second time that the Hulk 180 181 story was printed in France. The first time it was in a different book, like a Gamma Hulk comic it was called, and those, I think it uses like the 179 cover, Hulk 179 cover, I believe, but the Hulk 180 and 181 story is inside of it. And don't let somebody try and make you spend huge amount of money on that book. Like this book tends to sell for more. This Strange, but that other Hulk book, you can find them for $10 still in France. I've seen people trying to sell them for astronomical numbers, $500 to $500, $1,000, $1,500. It's just ridiculous. It's a $10 book, in France. So in the U.S., definitely probably shouldn't be selling for any more than $100. I'm starting to get a little, I guess I've been kind of doing a little bit, and maybe I'm getting like that old guy on the front lawn yelling at people, because I see kind of some of the new collectors and resellers and flippers doing some pretty stupid stuff that I don't think it's good for our hobby, like asking ridiculous money for easy to find books, but there seems to be plenty of people doing it, and I think it makes our niche, our side of the hobby look kind of bad, when you got somebody that spends $500 or $1,000 on a book that they could have easily just paid $100 for, had they done a little bit more research and had a little bit more patience. But that's why that's the whole pretty much reason I make these market report videos, is so even though I'm only showing eBay sales, and this is all American eBay sales, so this is kind of the higher end of the prices, and all these books you could find for cheaper if you're willing to put the work in and find it yourself. If you rely on resellers, you're gonna just go broke trying to find all this stuff. You gotta put the work in. And that's me as somebody that resells comics telling you that. So, it is of no benefit to me to tell you that, but I'm not in it for the money. I'm a collector, so I'm always trying to grow my collection, and you could ask plenty of people. I'm always willing to help. So if somebody needs help tracking something down, I've got no problem helping. All right, here we got the Incredible Hulk 181 French-Canadian edition. Pretty cool book. It's kind of famous because it went to print before they got the 181 cover, so they just used an interior panel, so it's actually Wendigo punching Hulk in the face. I think it's a cool comic. It's kind of goofy, but it's definitely desirable and doesn't come up for sale too often. This one sold for $202. And this is X-Men 101, first appearance of Phoenix. This one went pretty cheap for $38. Not a bad deal at all. And this one just sold recently, Hulk 181 from Brazil, sold for $200, and that's not a bad deal because it looked pretty high grade, but unfortunately there are bootlegs of this one too. So the bootleg market's kind of makes things difficult, especially for new collectors that don't know any better. This one did look legit to me. It did look like a legit 181. I had, or I don't know if I still have it, but I do have a bootleg and an original. And once you've kind of held the original, the bootleg is very easy to tell. But you still got to be careful. This is the Brazilian Batman 227, kind of the redone cover with Robin kicking the guy. Sold for $37, and this was obviously the second time this was printed, because they did the Abal version earlier in the 60s, or sorry, in the 70s. So this one I think is from the 90s, so tends to not be as desirable, but still a cool book for the collection. And here's another ASM 300. So we saw the one that sold for what, I think $200 earlier or even higher. And here's one that went for 43. So pays just to be patient. And here's a cool book you don't see too often. This is the Ghost Rider 1 from Brazil. This one this is actually a friend of mine was selling this book on eBay. That he lives in Brazil, and I almost emailed him to say, hey, just pull that off eBay and I'll take it. But I just, I'm kind of trying to slow down my buying and selling. So someone else got a great deal, $30. And this one's another one I almost bought. Had it in my cart and was ready to check out, and I was like, I'm not even like a Transformers fan. So this is a Federal Comics from Australia, 1985, sold for $13. Transformers 1. Probably not an easy book to find. Here's an Australian old Batman Catwoman cover. This one was pretty cool. I almost started to bid on it, but I believe the cover was detached, so that kind of killed it for me, so I decided not to bid on it. And that is it. So hopefully you guys got some information out of my video, and keep my eye on what's selling, and hope you guys have some luck scoring some good deals out there. All right, have a good one. Bye.